The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Andrea McMaster.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this edition of Consider This. I'm Andrea McMaster. Well, November 7th, Election Day, we hope you get out to the polls and vote. But before you do, we want to make sure that you're educated about a couple of the issues that will appear on your ballot. Two initiatives in particular. Initiative 421, the video Keno proposal. We'll be talking about that proposal specifically at the end of the show. But first, we're going to talk about Initiative 423, the state government spending lid constitutional amendment. The proposal would limit state spending to no more than inflation and population growth. We have Dave Navity joining us to speak for the amendment. Familiar face to many, Dave.
Yeah, good to see you.
Working with the Stop Overspending campaign.
That's right.
And we also have Lynn Rex, the Executive Director of the League of Nebraska Municipalities and a member of Nebraskans Against 423.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I'm glad that you could be here. First, what I want to do is give you a couple of minutes to speak on behalf of the proposal and against the proposal. And then we're going to go into some of what the public has been talking about. But first I wanted, Dave, for you to talk about why you got involved in this, why you think there's a spending problem, why is a spending lid necessary, and why does it need to be a constitutional amendment?
Sure. I'm in the financial advisory business, and I work with clients that are retirees quite a bit. And what began to happen in the 90s and even in the early 2000s is clients would come to my office and they'd say, Dave, you know what, we're excited, we just retired, we've done the math, then we can move to Florida, Texas, Nevada, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Tennessee, a whole bunch of states, and the tax savings pays for my house and my transportation to go back and forth, and I'm out of here. And we saw such a huge number of retirees leaving because of high taxes. That's why I got involved in the governor's race, and when I didn't win, I was prepared to go back to work until a man named Mike Groney from North Platte called me and said, hey, we're going to work to try to put a spending limit on the ballot. Do you want to help us? And in my governor's campaign, putting a spending limit in the Constitution was always a part of my master plan. And so I decided to postpone maybe going back to work full time and getting involved in the initiative. And the reason we need to is Nebraska's gone from being the 14th highest tax state in America over 10 years ago to the 6th. If you take real estate tax, income tax, and motor vehicle tax, and you add those three taxes together, if you move to a state like South Dakota, you can cut your tax bill in half. If you move to Colorado, you can drop 40% off your tax bill. And the high-growth southern states that have warm climates are 50% less expensive. So we've got to get spending under control. Spending's gone up 280% over the last 20 years. And you know, if you don't think we can be the highest tax state in America, you're kidding yourself, because Maine right now is the highest tax state in America, and we're working our way there. The only way to bring tax relief is to slow down spending. The only way to do that, in my opinion, is to have a constitutional amendment that puts a firewall between all the special interest groups that work over the legislature every year and put them in a position where they can say no without getting the punishment of the special interest groups the next time their election comes around. And so all this thing does is it limits the growth to the inflation rate plus population growth. And if the legislature gets in a bind and they can't pay the bills, 2/3 of them have to vote to take it out to the people. And then the people of Nebraska have an opportunity to weigh in, examine whether or not the reasons are good reasons, and then make the choice whether or not to extend the limit or to keep it in place. A lot of times you'll hear, well, geez, if this thing passes, all your local taxes are going to go up. And property taxes in Colorado went down after they put their spending limit in place, and they did not see a big increase in local taxes. Colorado is the only state that has this initiative. And the nice thing about the provision to take it to the people, if the citizens of Nebraska sense that if they don't extend the limit at the state level, their local taxes are going to go up. The citizens are going to vote to give the legislature the ability to spend more than the limit. You're never going to see a situation where your local taxes are going to go up.
Okay,
So,
I'm gonna stop there
that's fine.
because that's enough time. We
Okay,
have to get
that's
more.
good.
We have to
Yeah.
get more in depth in some of those issues, especially because I think people need to be clear on what they're voting on. But Lynn, I want to give you a chance to talk. Do you really think that people are educated about what 423 will do, and what would you like to tell the voters before they head to the polls?
Well, clearly, I think there's a lot more work to be done, and there are over 70 statewide organizations that are opposing this. And the reason why we're opposing this is because this is a seriously flawed formula based on CPI, which is what consumers, what you and I buy, not what state governments buy. For example, as a function of CPI, you and I buy 3% on education. The state of Nebraska is 46% on CPI. But there's a reason why we're opposing this, not just the flawed formula, but what that will do. What will it do to our property taxes? We know property taxes will increase. 1/3 of the state's budget is dedicated to property tax relief. We understand that as it applies to not just K through 12, but also post-secondary education, other programs across the board, it will result in property tax increases. We're concerned also about what happened in Colorado because we don't want that to happen here. We can learn from what happened in Colorado. You may know that Christy Hargrove, who's a parent, was involved in the PTA and the PTOs in Colorado, was here this week. She voted for Tabor when in Colorado. She still is a resident of Colorado. And what she's saying is she was misled because her property taxes, in fact, did go up. And whatever she got back in terms of some type of a rebate from state government, she paid far more in fees. We do not want to have folks, when they register their elementary school kids or their middle school or high school children, have to pay an $800 to $1,000 registration fee. That's what happened. In Colorado, parent organizations, Andrea, were asked to take out loans so that they could have basic computers, books, not anything other than just the basics. And indeed, I know that Dave's heard this because I've said this many times. The thing I think that was most shocking to me are the memos to parents saying, make sure your child has a coat that's warm enough to sit in school because we can afford to heat the pipes so they don't freeze, but we can't afford to heat keep your kids warm. Those are the types of things we're concerned about. We're concerned about on the post-secondary education side of this. In Colorado is tuition increases. Clearly, that's what would happen here. I think the universities have done studies relative to this. In Colorado, they dropped from the middle of the pack in funding on post-secondary education to 49th. Also, you'll note that every public health care organization is in strong opposition to this. Doctors, nurses, everybody across the board. Why is that? Because they understand what this would do, not just to our elderly, but to kids. We're concerned about the Medicaid cuts, the type that happened in Colorado. We're concerned about the loss of our homestead exemption program. We have a $60 million homestead exemption program in the state of Nebraska, and the elderly and others are very concerned about that. That's part of our property tax relief program. So whether you're looking at all the state chambers that have come out in strong opposition to this, all the public safety groups, law enforcement, firefighters, everyone that's taken a vote is against it. All 13 ag groups are opposing this because they understand what this would mean for agriculture. And of course, the Nebraska Realtors Association, home builders, all across the board understand that this seriously flawed formula will have a dramatic impact on our economy, and we don't want that to happen in Nebraska.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. I'm going to share some of the bullet points we've either heard on advertisements or some of the flyers that I've been getting in the mail here at my household. A little bit so people can hear what's been thrown out there, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what those mean. First off, in speaking 423, a couple of the points. State spending is out of control. You've mentioned this already, Dave. Grown by 228% over the past 20 years. It won't hurt programs. It will just stop politicians from spending every penny they get their hands on. Nebraskans want to see how their tax dollars are spent. 423 would allow for healthy growth in the state budget with limits on reckless spending. If the government wants to spend more than the state spending limit, they can, but they have to ask the voters first. Now, against 423, the Nebraskans against 423, we've heard consequences of the state spending lid would be, if passed, it would lock an inflexible budget formula into our state constitution. Programs and services would be cut, those vital services that we need. Increased reliance on property taxes, increased reliance on fees and tuition to make up for funding shortfalls. The limitation of the spending lid would prohibit investing in new priorities or programs. And overall, 423 would hurt economic development, harm public safety, and harm agriculture. Summing up much of what you said, these statements, though, raise a lot of questions to me.
Sure.
Okay. Why is the state spending out of control?
Well, let me just first of all say, Lynn is a master and a good debater and competitor, but all the stuff she threw out, in my opinion, is nothing more than political trash talk and scare tactics, and it can't be supported. What she's talking about, she's just trying to scare everybody into thinking the worst possible scenarios are going to occur if this passes. What we're talking about here is giving the state government the same budget they had last year and an increase every year. The difference is it's not a blank check. It's limited to the cost of living plus population growth. Why do you pick that formula? You pick that formula because that's what our incomes are based on. And if you grow government at a faster rate than income growth increases, you're going to get tax increases. You're going to get exactly what we've seen in the past. The big thing with Nebraska, and I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but the big thing in Nebraska is that we've never modernized, streamlined, made any serious attempt to eliminate duplication or waste. We've never privatized anything at the state level. We've never done it. So you got to ask yourself the question, why? The reason is the special interest groups are so powerful and they have so much influence on the elected officials that if you run the risk of changing the system and maybe taking a little bit of money away from a certain organization to make things more competitive for everybody else, they come out and they will work against you like they're working against 423. Just the public education sector alone has put $1.2 million in the campaign against 423. Now, public education is the groups that raise the property taxes. And property taxes have gone up 55% since we tried to do this back in 1998. And now they're telling us don't support it because your property taxes are going to go up, and they're the ones that raise them. So it's kind of like the fox inside the hen house.
Dave, I think you're a good debater too, just like you said that Lynn is. But I also want to point out that 37 state senators are siding with what Lynn is saying.
Exactly.
They're against this. They're saying that there would be higher property taxes, more lawsuits, prison crowding, crisis, health care shortages in Nebraska if Initiative 423 passed.
There's no
so
way,
how could there not be higher property taxes?
There is
Andrew,
no way.
I can substantiate everything that I'm saying.
There is no way that will occur if the legislature does their job. We have never, ever pruned back government in Nebraska.
Oh, that's just not true.
Ever.
Okay.
We've never done a top-to-bottom
I think we need to give Lynn
performance
a chance to talk right now.
First of all, I can substantiate everything that I'm saying. We're not dealing in a world of make-believe. I think the proponents have dealt in a world of make-believe. They make it up and hope the rest of us believe it. Those of us opposing it, the over 70 statewide organizations representing the private sector and the public sector have come together to say we understand what this will do. Please go to notinnebraska.com and you can understand how this applies. Their formula also has an emergency provision. 3/4 of state senators would somehow magically come to Lincoln if there's a crisis, Andrea, to try to figure out how to appropriate funds. If you apply that, and we have talked to several folks that have been involved in this effort for some time, it doesn't make any sense. Many of us know what happens when tornadoes whip across the state. Several years ago, we had a snowstorm that virtually shut down our interstate, our telecommunications, our entire infrastructure. You couldn't get folks to Lincoln, Nebraska to vote on a 3/4 vote, the appropriation. In addition, in terms of streamlining government, I think it's very important you understand, and others watching this understand, that those of us that are working against this, we know that state government and local government and certainly the federal government always needs to do more to look at all the kinds of things that are being discussed, whether it's privatization, performance audits, those types of things. The state of Nebraska has, they need to do more of it. Local governments need to look at that. So does the federal government. So does the federal government. But I think it's important to look at probably one of the biggest efforts of privatization in this state has been mental health reform. And I don't think there are too many people that wouldn't say it's been anything other than a debacle. So just because it's privatization doesn't mean it works. And I think it's so important to put in perspective here that we are looking at a situation where Nebraska is facing, I think, one of the biggest issues that we've looked at in over 30 years. And this did not work. It's a failed experiment.
No, it
did not work. That's why in 2005, over 1,100 groups with $10 million came in and said, we're going to suspend this for 5 years because it doesn't work. And they would have repealed it.
fourth the store.
They would have repealed
I want to
it.
hear why you say that it did work in Colorado, because like Lynn, I've only heard that it did not work.
It was a tremendous success. Spending in Colorado, the 10 years before they passed their spending limit, was double the rate of inflation, the same that it's been in Nebraska for 20 years. They passed the spending limit, and Colorado keeps their budget right at the inflation level for 10 years after that. The economy soared in the 90s, states made lots of money. Colorado could not spend all the money. Nebraska in the 90s had lots of extra money, and they raised the budget and they spent it all. California did the same thing. Almost every other state in America did the exact same thing. Colorado couldn't because they had a spending limit, and they gave back to the taxpayers $3.2 billion. The average family of four got back $3,200. She never talks about that. It's not a big deal to her because she doesn't care whether the taxpayers get any money back or not. But what's even more important is that when revenues dropped in Colorado, and they dropped 16% in 1 year, revenues went below the low budget that Colorado had. Colorado's budget wasn't way up here. They didn't spend everything they took it in because they gave it back to the taxpayers. Their budget was down here. So when the economy dropped, Colorado didn't have to raise taxes on everybody. You know what we did? We raised taxes. We not only spent all the money, we raised taxes on everybody when the economy tanked. And so what the residents, and let me finish, this is important. What the residents of Colorado did is they said, look, we've been getting rebates back for years. We recognize we've had to postpone infrastructure spending because Colorado was growing so much. We're willing to go 5 years without tax rebates. And so what she says was a dismal disaster. It might have been a disaster for the education community that didn't get as much money as they wanted. It might have been for big government and big government bureaucrats, but the taxpayers loved it. They got back $3.2 billion, and when things got tough, they didn't have to increase taxes.
Okay. In favor of time, I have to give Lynn a chance.
Yes, Andrew, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here because I think it's important that people understand that if you talk to citizen groups, and over the 1,100 groups that opposed this and voted to suspend this last year in Colorado, the reason was because the amount of the rebate that they got back, and by the way, Nebraska's provision doesn't have a rebate, but the rebate that they received, they paid far more in fees. Agriculture paid 300% increases in fees. Tuition went up dramatically. They went from the middle of the pack in post-secondary education funding to the bottom, K through 12. That, in matter of fact, by the year 2000, this was adopted in Colorado in 1992. By the year 2000, parent groups, PTAs, PTOs, they had had enough. They were tired of taking out loans and personally, as parents, having to pay for this to just get the basics, the schools, the computers, the types of things that they needed. So in 2000, another constitutional amendment was passed, and that required the legislature to put more funding in K through 12 education. All that did then was result in deeper cuts elsewhere.
Okay, we have to wrap things up. We have to wrap things up today. But you do have websites. You do have some information out there, and I'm going to let folks know about those because there's still going to be a lot of questions after watching this. So some websites to remember: Stopover Spending website, www.sosnebraska.com, and the Nebraskans Against 423 website is www.notinnebraska.com.
Please vote no on 423.
Vote yes.
A failed experiment.
The taxpayers
Lynn and Dave,
will love
thank
it.
you very much for being with us, and we'll be back right after this to talk about the video Keno proposal.
Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Keep the money in Nebraska is what supporters say. Look at all the good that Keno money has done for local community betterment programs. But opponents point out that Video Keno would only increase social costs and also create more gambling addicts. Today, a closer look at Initiative 421. The Video Keno proposal will be on your ballot November 7th. And today, we're going to go in depth into the issue so you know you're an educated voter when you head to the polls. Joining us for the initiative, Bill Harvey, the legal advisor for Big Red Keno. Glad that you could be here today. And Pat Lunger, the executive director of Gambling with the Good Life. And Pat, thank you. Nice to see you again. First off, I need to get some background. What's the difference between Video Keno and traditional Keno that already exists in many of our counties and communities?
Okay, well, thanks for asking. Keno is a game that's existed in Nebraska for about 20 years. It's authorized by counties, cities, and villages as a lottery, as a way to raise community betterment dollars. And to date, it's raised about $250 million for community betterment. The way that it's played is that players fill out their number selections on a paper ticket basically, and hand that to a Keno writer who enters those number selections into a computer. And then the results of the game are drawn and players determine whether they've won or lost. With Video Keno, the player will have a self-service player station to the extent that that's authorized by the community, and it would be basically a video touchscreen where the player could just enter their numbers directly, enter their wager directly, and play the game right there and get the results.
Why do you want, this is not a constitutional amendment, first off.
That's exactly right.
It's a proposal.
It's a statutory amendment, that's correct.
Okay, so talk a little bit about why you were for Video Keno.
Well, as general counsel for Big Red Keno, what we'd like to do, and the reason we're supporting this, is we believe this is a way for counties, cities, and villages to have another way to raise community betterment dollars and basically offer another way to play the game of Keno that we have today. We're not legalizing any other games. We're not legalizing poker or blackjack or slots, as has been suggested by our opposition. We're simply authorizing another way to play the game of Keno.
Okay, Pat, I know you have a lot to say.
I do.
You know, Video Keno to you has many more problems than the traditional Keno.
Yeah, it's a slot machine. They can call it a player station, they can call it anything they want to call it, but it is a slot machine. Anyone that wants to see them can go over, and there's 17 of them located at Harrah's Casino right across the river. And the community betterment that these would bring are far outweighed by the 1-to-3 ratio. For every $1 a community ever gains in gambling revenue, it costs them $3 in social costs. And this is the worst proposal that we've seen in 11 years. This would put unlimited slot machines in over 600 locations all over the state. And as far as community betterment, the money that they've given, they've taken twice as much in profits. And this is not sponsored by the communities. If that was the case, they'd be sponsoring it. Instead, there's a few key players in this that have put over $500,000 into this campaign just to enrich themselves at the expense of their fellow Nebraskans.
You know,
and we just find that to be heartless. Bill, you had your time.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
What's the dangers of Video Keno in comparison to traditional Keno? Is because you can play it so much more rapid?
Yes. The Keno that's played now is a 5-minute game. It's played on a paper card, and you have a 5-minute interval. It's apples and oranges compared with the slot machines. The slot machines with the Keno screen on it, you can play every 2 seconds. You can lose $650 an hour in a quarter Keno slot machine. And this is what the voters need to know. If the truth was on the ballot and it said vote yes or no for unlimited slots at over 600 locations, we wouldn't even have to run a campaign, because we know the hearts and the minds of the voters. They voted it down for 11 years. We care about the quality of life. We care about our families. And slot machines across Nebraska is not going to improve it. But our concern is that on the ballot, it's going to say vote yes or no for Video Keno. And that's extremely deceptive, because it's nowhere near the same game. It's the same game, a lot worse.
But the way that I understand it is that before Video Keno would be in a community, that community would also have to vote to have that in the community?
That's exactly correct. In fact, there's so much about what Pat's just said that's incorrect that I hardly know where to start. But the main thing is, I think, to talk about this as uncontrolled slot machines is just completely false. It's simply a Keno game. That's all we're authorizing. We're not authorizing spinning reels. We're not authorizing flashing lights. We're not authorizing anything except another way to play the game of Keno. And you're exactly right about that, Andrea. There would have to be a choice by that local community to have this game. In fact, the map that Pat puts out in her advertising is quite deceptive, because they show Keno being located in communities that have already chosen not to have Video Keno, being located in communities that have already chosen not to have Keno itself. So we can't imagine those communities going back and making a choice to have Keno. That's what local choice is all about. We have a real unique statute in Nebraska, the Nebraska County and City Lottery Act, which is the only local option lottery statute in the nation. And it gives every county, city, and village in the state control over their own lottery.
So this is just giving communities the option, or counties the option, to have Video Keno, but it doesn't necessarily mean that an operator, a Keno operator, could have Video Keno. They would have to first go to the governing body that would have to vote that in that community?
That is exactly right. And the community continues to have control over that game, including the speed of that game. There's a lot of discussion from the opposition about the speed of the game. The community will control the speed of that game, not the operator, not the manufacturer, but the community.
This is going to create a civil war within our state. The gambling industry is known for coming in and preying upon the greed and to get people excited, just like we're always being told all the money's going to Iowa. Therefore, Nebraska needs to have slot machines. This will put community against community, so that if Sarpy County would authorize, and it doesn't go to a vote of the people, it may go to the county commission or the city council or the county board. If they go before them and they're allowed to have 10 machines or 100 machines, how long do you think it'd be before Douglas County's operators would come to them and saying, this is an unfair advantage? Our people are going to play the slots down in Sarpy County and all the money's going to them. Well, this proposal alone calls for 64% of the profit to go to the originators, get 39% who have sponsored the bill and put $500,000 into it, and 25% stay with the operators. This is a very deceptive piece of legislation. A slot machine will play any game you want it to play. You can walk into the slot room over at Harrah's and you'll see 100 different machines playing 100 different games, from poker to bingo to the cherries and the bells and the whistles, and including Keno. So they have written this proposal that they will only be allowed Keno slots for their own benefit. There is no community input into this at all. Only the operators are paying for this. Everyone that really cares about this is on our side. Tom and Nancy Osborne, our chairman, and Warren Buffett, the governor, the entire congressional delegation. You know, every church in the state is working with us on this. Every religious denomination in the state. These are people who care about the state. These are people who know that it's going to bring addiction and bankruptcy and crime and embezzlement. These are the people who care.
I really have to call foul though on a couple things Pat said, because number one, she keeps repeating that the governor has endorsed the opposition to this, and that's not factually correct. The governor has taken no position on 421, and he's made that very clear to both sides. And so I think Pat needs to quit repeating that the governor supports their opposition.
The governor's not here, so we can't ask him right
but
now.
I've personally talked to the governor, and also one of our board members has personally talked to the governor.
And so did we,
okay,
Pat.
but one something that I don't understand that Pat said, these video Keno machines, she's calling slot machines, actually they'd be able to play other games as well, like poker?
No, that is absolutely false, and that's what they keep telling us, that these machines would be able to play other games. But the fact of the matter is the only game that would be authorized under Nebraska law, just as it is now, is Keno. And in fact, we can't put one machine in one location without the approval, number one, of the Nebraska Department of Revenue, who would have to promulgate regulations to approve the machines, and also the local community, who would have to approve each machine that was placed. This talk of a civil war, we think, is really not accurate, because it hasn't happened with Keno.
We are running out of time. I want to get a couple websites out there so people can go for more information. KeepTheMoneyInNebraska.com and GamblingWithTheGoodLife.com to hear more from the opponents. Thank you so much, and we hope that you do head out to vote on November 7th. Thanks for joining us.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 10th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.